a mystery to you. Around this time of year, Hanukkah comes, and it comes anywhere between November 25th and December 28th, because we're on the lunar calendar. There's a 30-day process of movement. So the story of Hanukkah, a long time ago and far, far away, about 2,000 years ago. The story of Hanukkah started around the time that Alexander the Great conquered many countries, Judea, Egypt, Syria being among them. And Alexander the Great was not only great because of his conquering skill, but what made him so great was that when he would conquer countries, he'd send emissaries from his country saying, you can live your life as you want to. I'm not going to bother you as long as you stay loyal to the emperor and you pay your taxes. Well, that was doable for the Jewish people because they're always loyal to whoever. They were always conquered. They never, for many of the years, they'd never been independent people. They'd already been conquered. But this was a treat that they didn't have to, they could live their lives. And the Jewish people have a different calendar. They have rules that are set by what we call the Torah, we call Bible. And their whole religion is their lifestyle. We live by Jewish laws, we live by Jewish customs, we live by Jewish rituals, and our life revolves around those, even though we live in another society. So to have this king tell us we can live our lives as we want was amazing. So for many years the Jews lived in peace and harmony with their fellow Greeks that came in to live in Judea, and everything was great. But around the year 168 BCE, that all changed with different, many years later in different conquerors, things started to change. And now they were under the Greek-Syrian rule. And the Syrian-Greek soldiers came through one day and decided to seize the temple and make it in honor to Zeus. And so idol worship started happening in the temple, and this really bothered the Jewish people, but they decided, we're still able to do everything we want to do, no one's killing us, so, they can have the temple, we'll figure out what to do with the temple stuff. And they kept living their lives without the temple. The temple was where they did their sacrifices and the rituals, but they decided they would forego that and do it differently, just so that they wouldn't have to fight. And then finally, about 167 BCE, another emperor came in, his name was Antiochus, and he was not a great leader. He decided that all the countries that he was ruler over, they would have to all bow down and worship the Greek god Zeus and all the Greek gods. And that anybody doing any other religion would be punishable by death. Well, that was a problem, because we didn't bow down to idols, we wouldn't do that. And so that became a fight in a way. The way Jews fight is to not bow down and to, to resist that way. And so we weren't fighters, so we started to do it by standing up and saying, no, I won't do it. And several people died in the process of standing up for their rights, and that did make a difference because the Greek army was much stronger than we were. But what was the catalyst is that not having the rights was a catalyst for many people to get so angry that they started to resist in many other ways. And the resistance was at first very subversive, and subversive is a technical, is one interesting term, because what they would do is go out into the fields, into the forest, and they would take picnic baskets, and they would take blankets, and they would take their Torah and their books to study, and they'd have a lookout for the Greek soldiers that would be coming around to look for them for doing things like that, and the person who was lookout would send some kind of signal to the people that the Greek soldiers were coming, and they would put their books away and hide them, and they would take out their dreidel, and play dreidel. And as the soldiers came up, they'd see they were playing dreidel, and they were having a great time, having a picnic, and so they left them alone. And then when the Greek soldiers went away, they'd take out their books and they'd read. So that's how they were able to continue their religion, by doing it underground. But there was a family of Hasmonean, the Greek priestly family, that just couldn't take it anymore. They thought, this is ridiculous that we're having to hide. And so they, in this town of Modea, started to have a resistance movement, and they taught themselves how to fight. And they would go, as the Greek soldiers would be going through the roads and in the country and into the forest, the Hasmoneans, the Maccabees they were called, would jump on them and kill them in surprise attacks. Well, that's the first, the Greek soldiers, and many soldiers, as you know, in fighting, they would fight in big, coming down at each other. That's the way they would fight, in broad daylight and in front of everybody. They had never encountered guerrilla warfare. And so this was the first time guerrilla warfare was actually used in technical fighting, because that's how the Jews knew how to fight. They couldn't do it, they didn't have large bands of fighting. So they would knock out regiments, and then the government would have to send for more regiments. And so between the time the regiments were knocked out and sending more troops enforcement, they would get a couple of months or so of freedom. And after many, many years or months, well, actually it was kind of years, that this would happen of taking out regiments and sending in more regiments, finally the government said, you know what? They pay their taxes, they're loyal to the government, and we're spending a lot of time, money, and men by trying to reinforce this. Let's just leave them alone. And so they quit sending regiments, and they left the temple. They finally just kind of backed out of all of Judea because it was costing them too much money and time and men. And they said, just have your lives, live it, go ahead. So that was a victory. I mean, you know, and the victory of Hanukkah was making these soldiers and the government move out and allowing us to live our lives the way we wanted to. So once the temple was left alone, they had to go in and clean up the temple. Well, you can imagine after many, many years of Greek worship, where they would do animal slaughters and they let animals run through the temple, there was feces, there was blood, there was all, you know, it was very dirty and very gross. And they went through looking to see what they had to do to clean up the temple, and they found one little cruse of oil that still had the priestly seal that it was still pure and had been done in a way that it was holy oil. And so they took this holy oil, and this is called a Hanukkah. It's called a menorah, but there was a big 7-branch menorah in the temple that was used to light the temple. And so they used this oil to light the temple so that they could clean it. And the oil was only enough to last for 1 day, they thought. And miraculously, it lasted for 8 days. And why was that really so important? Well, the miracle itself. But if you notice this time of year, it gets dark real early. And the only way they had to light the temple was this oil. And so it took them less time. They were able to clean the temple quicker because they had the oil burning all day long for 8 days to clean it, and they were able to then to make more oil to keep the menorah lit. And in the temple, there's a thing it's called in Hebrew ner tamid, eternal light. And there's always to be a light in the temple to signify that God is always there. So it was very important to keep that light on. So at this time of year, the 25th of Kislev, which is the lunar calendar of the Jews, is when the temple was finally cleaned and they were able to rededicate the temple. And that's what Hanukkah means. In Hebrew, it means dedication, rededication. And so they celebrated and rededicated the temple, and every year at this time, that's what we do. We use the dreidel to commemorate and celebrate their bravery of keeping up our religion for us so that we'd have it here today, 2,000 years ago. We eat potato latkes to celebrate the oil. And in Israel, they make these things called sufganiot. They're donuts filled with cream. But coming from a Polish background, we do potato latkes because that's what they had in those days, potatoes. And then, starting on the 20th, which I think is Tuesday night? Tuesday night? Because all holidays and Jewish holidays start as the sun goes down, just as creation, it was dark first and then it was light. And so we light the shamash, which is the candle that lights all the candles. And the first night, we light one candle, and the second night, we light the second. And the third night, we light the third, all three. And the fourth night, we light 4. And the fifth night, we light 5. And the sixth night, we light 6. And
the 7th night, we light 7. And the 8th night, we light 8.
And we celebrate the ability to live our lives as Jews and do our rituals and observe our laws and live our lives as we have for the past 2,000 years. And so I hope that the next time you see the Hanukkah lights, you will see it. The next time you see a menorah, you will see the Hanukkah lights in a different light. Thank you.